All right, all right. How about a round of applause, you guys? Yamnuska. Wow. Okay. Special treat. Yeah, Timmy O'Neill. Put your hands together for Timmy O'Neill.
I'm back. I'm back.
He cannot leave. He is hooked on Laguna Coast Film and
Never
Music
going
Fest.
away.
Deeply enjoyed that. I know you were at a film festival that this was showing, which one?
It just premiered at Banff Mountain Film up in Banff, Alberta, just north of where Yam is.
And it
won Audience Choice.
There you go. Yeah.
Because everybody that lives there voted for that film, and they stuffed the ballot box.
A lot of Canadians in the ballot box.
Yeah.
No, but it gives us a chance to talk about, I mean, this is a film, obviously, it leans towards climbers, but maybe you could talk about the reverence as a climber that you have for certain spots. Clearly, Yamnuska is one of those places that it almost becomes sacred in a way.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, the film opens, of course, with a nod to the native culture, right? That this land was initially, of native Canadian, and then they talk about the mountain being a spirit. They talk about the mountain representing a big part of the culture. And then as far as this film, it's a love story. It's a bio about the climbers that went to Yamnuska and did these first ascents. And as you know, climbing as a whole has its own genre in literature, right? Because you have these individuals who have these deep experiences, not just on the rock, but getting to the rock, and then getting down from the rock where they're transformed forever, and they have this deep desire to share that. So this film is in that vein.
And you also notice, looking at these climbers, maybe you can help us understand too, like a good-looking bunch of dirtbaggers. And dirtbagging, by the way, we should explain to people, it's a complimentary term in climbing, right?
A dirtbag is basically defined by somebody who eschews the normal, conventional mold and does their own thing. And it's more important, of course, to do the deep dive into the sport than to have an external value. And it's often seen by those working in the cubes as the apotheosis or the best example of the sport.
And my spending time with Jimmy, I know you're good friends with Jimmy Chin as well. I mean, he misses those dirtbag days. Is that part of you too, where you think back of the simpler times of when you're in a van, you're in Yosemite for the summer?
I mean, not even a van. My earliest memories of being deep dirtbag were living in Joshua Tree in a cave, spending $100 a month, only existing on like bare minimum. And when I first went there, I met all of these people that were unlike anyone I'd ever met before, but then I realized they were just like me. I met my tribe. So the deep dirtbags, and I think dirtbag as a way of life, as you could see with these individuals here, it's a through line forever, right? It's kind of a minimalist because you want to maximize your time outside having the deep experience and minimize your time necessarily being inside to work. So that's why, as you know, I'm underemployed and I pre-tired.
Pre-tired. I'm working on that. I'm working on the pre-tired. It's hard here in Laguna. It's not so easy to pre-tire in Laguna.
There's a bridge you can go live underneath, Pat. I'm sure the overpass is ready for you.
Or the boardwalk. There's always the boardwalk.
The boardwalk's fantastic as well. There's lots of dumpsters to dive in. You can sleep in there. There's your food.
Okay, duly noted. I know you've worked on a lot of different films. I think as fans, when we see films like this, we take it for granted of getting the imagery. Maybe you can speak to how difficult it is to get those shots. You feel like you're on board, but you never see the film crew, you never see the cameras. Maybe talk to the difficulty that comes with that.
Well, there's two things. There's pre-drone and post-drone, right? Like the drone photography has changed the experience. Like the first scenes you see on this film where you get this amazing shot where you're flying and you have this sense of being on the wall yet apart from it. It's drone photography. But the real work is interesting when the climbing team is embedded with the photography team. So what will have to happen is somebody will lead the climb first, then the photographer or cameraman, the cinematographer will be above, then the climbers go back down, then they re-lead the pitch again. So you have to bring the cameraman up, then come back down. So you're essentially doing the climb twice. And a lot of times, for example, the film Free Solo, that's the example of the worst case scenario where your subject matter could fall to their death. Well, and you're filming them.
And
right?
You had a lot of the cinematographers, the guys working the cameras, stating, I thought I was going to watch Alex fall to his death.
Right. So in the case of Yamnuska, the film that we saw now, there wasn't that, but there still is this sort of risk voyeurism that's happening as you're trained on the climber. Like Vicky, she has this experience where the rock cuts loose, she becomes emotional, very afraid, and the cameraman has to pick between, do I get involved and enact a rescue, or do I let this unfold because it's epic filmmaking?
Have you had those moments where you're like, yo, I need a hand?
I have done that, and they've thrown the rope to me, and it was like, we didn't get the gnarly shot that they wanted. Often I've called the cinematographers vampires because they're sucking that like adrenaline risk-based gnar and feeding off of it, transferring it through their camera into the hard drive.
Vampiric filmmaking. I love it. It's so good. When we talk about this era, it's so interesting when you go back and we're watching like the 50s and the 60s, and we were talking about how much we respect what they were doing. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't know that there was this moment about, taking that top approach and getting out there with a Makita. And I remember, I know that things went in a direction where it was very anti, like kind of pulling away from trad and going towards free soloing, and but I mean the amount of bolts and like coming from the top. Help us understand that was an actual thing. It seems cheating in a way.
In the 80s, what happened basically, the French who invented climbing, right? Where climbing really was invented was in the French, Swiss, Austrian, and Italian Alps, right? That's where it began, this tradition. So they have always driven the cutting edge of it. And in the 80s, they decided that they would go from the top down where it's safer and establish the bolts, the protection, instead of what they were doing earlier, going ground up. And that ethic change caused a schism within climbing that went to fisticuffs and threats of killing one another. And what would happen is they would come and remove all the bolts or smash the hangers over, and then they would get put back in. And so I never participated in that. I've done both rappelling and ground up. I feel like climbing ethics is sort of like an oxymoron, like military intelligence perhaps. Easy now. But anyway, I feel that with the level, what happened was when they came in from the top down and made it safer, the level of climbing, the difficulty was raised as a result. So there was the compromise there.
And we saw a couple of generations, which is so, seeing Urs, he was climbing at what age? Was it 80?
He was from like Austria, initially climbing over in Europe, and then he comes to the States, right? So these guys were climbing their whole life, basically.
And as a climber, what can you expect? Are you climbing into your 70s? Is it common?
If I'm alive, I'm definitely climbing, yes.
And I know you just became a proud papa.
I did. I have my little son, Cody, who's 10 months now.
So you could be climbing with him shortly.
He's going to be climbing probably by the 2 or 3. We're going to get him climbing. Somebody told me recently that you could pretty much get the kid to do what you want until like they're 10 or 11 or 12, and then they might shift. So up until then, he'll be climbing with us.
And it's like
he'll have no choice.
He's like, peace, Dad. I'm going from the top down.
He can go from the top down. He might just go like, no, I'm done with climbing. I'm going to go and get into like professional knitting or something.
Something like that. Yeah. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention or give you a chance to mention, because I know you have a film that you worked on yourself, and it's going to be showing in the short film block tomorrow.
Yeah, there's a film that I made called Soundscape that's playing tomorrow It's playing from in the film block 12 to 2, and it essentially is a short film, 15 minutes, that does a deep dive into how an individual imagines and sees the landscape that they're climbing through echolocation and touch. It's my dear friend Eric Weinmayer, who has no light perception, and it's a film that uses animation in a very unique way to put the viewer in this sort of radical empathetic role where you understand what it's like to be blind, because we make you Eric as he describes what it is he feels and sees through echolocation and touch. You get to do that. So it allows you to basically have a greater understanding, a greater appreciation, and a deeper dive into what it means to be on this wild thing called life.
And as I've said many times, I'm telling you, the short films during the day block, kind of those secret nuggets, nothing to take away from the full-length film. So that's going to be 12 to 2 tomorrow. Timmy, we thank you for coming out and sharing a little insight into the climbing world.
Yeah, everybody.